Okay, we're here with Becky Hogan. This is Aurora Ideas, and I want to thank you, Becky, for welcoming Aurora Ideas into your house, into your apartment. And we're kind of heating up here. We're getting closer and closer to Election Day, November 2nd. Becky is running for at-large Aurora City Council. You're going to be representing, if you win, 380,000 people. That's a lot of people. But we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, but there's just one thing that I really want to know about you. I know that Becky is an expert in economic development, and we know that Democrats and Republicans are pushing for economic development here in Aurora. That can be good and bad, mostly good. But the one question I have for you, and then I'm going to hand over the floor to you, is give us a time when you faced some major adversity in your life. How did you handle that adversity? How did it change you for better or for worse? How did it change your perspective on life? And how did it change you?
Oh my goodness, you're just going to jump right into that, aren't you? And probably make me cry all at the same time. I'm wondering if you could begin with a little lighter question, and let's kind of start over. Let me get my composure.
Okay.
That was not a question that I expected, because I have had a fair amount of adversity in my life.
Mm-hmm.
How about if we start this with you warming me up to something?
Okay. So basically, economic development.
Yes.
We know that Democrats and Republicans want it. What I'm worried about is usually when you have economic development, corporate America comes in here and bulldozes over everyone, and as a result, we get displacement, we get all kinds of things. The cost of everything goes up, because whenever you have economic development, usually you have more people moving in, and we already have a lot of people moving in, and housing prices are going through the roof, healthcare prices are going through the roof, childcare prices are going through the roof, car prices are going through the roof. Everything seems like it's going through the roof with so many people moving here. And then on top of that, we've got refugees that are going to be coming here because both Republicans and Democrats want the Afghans to come here. Juan Marcano wrote a letter to Joe Biden, so we're going to have maybe tens of thousands of Afghans coming here. I don't understand why we need more people, more economic development when it's already not working. So you're an expert in economic development. So tell me, how do we make economic development work for everyone?
Well, economic development is bringing both jobs and expanding our existing businesses here in Aurora. So what it does is, if we can bring jobs, we provide people the opportunity to work. In that opportunity, for many, particularly for the minority or the refugees, we actually allow is not the right word, we give them the opportunity to really find their American dream. Mm-hmm. Their ability to work, their ability to generate wealth, their ability to have a place where they have freedoms to choose what they do, when they want to do it, a place that we provide education to their children so that they can grow as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that economic development is not a bad, that it's not a bad word, that it truly does represent opportunity. Economic development in and of itself is bringing goods and services from outside your community to inside and generating a base of wealth for your city. With that base, you can turn around and do some amazing things for your city. Libraries, recreation, resources, community events, everything from education to entertainment, to a variety of housing. Mm-hmm. So without economic development, your community can become very, very stagnant, which you don't want. The city of Aurora has been blessed with a great deal of land and water. We have the resources to grow, unlike some of our neighbors, Denver, Lakewood, who do not. Their boundaries will be fixed. They'll be doing some development and a lot of redevelopment because they don't have some of the tools that we are able to supply for people. So bottom line, I don't look at economic development being a bad thing.
Okay. So minimum wage here in Aurora, it's at $12.32 an hour.
Yep.
And a lot of experts would say that a more realistic minimum wage, if you want it to be a living wage, would be around, I think like around $18 an hour, something like that. But we've got an issue here. Jeff Bezos is worth $200 billion. Jeff Bezos is worth more money than 50% of the population of the United States. And then we have a minimum wage at $12.32 an hour here in Aurora. The income inequality is mind-blowing. And as long as we have the freedom to make as much money as you want, don't you think that we should have wages that are fair? So for working people, they have a wage that is a living wage. And do you think that $12.32 an hour is a living wage? And if not, how do we steer these waters? And with globalization and technology happening very rapidly, artificial intelligence is taking jobs away, globalization is taking jobs away. So my brother, he's in the financial industry. His secretary got laid off last year, and they shipped his secretary's job to India. So his secretary is now based in India. A friend of mine works in the Amazon warehouse over in Aurora, and the HR in that warehouse has been outsourced to the Philippines. So if there's an issue, you turn on your computer and you do a Zoom meeting with HR based in the Philippines. So not only are blue-collar jobs getting shipped overseas to China and Mexico, but white-collar jobs are starting to get shipped overseas as well. So as long as you have a workforce pool that is getting bigger and bigger, it's causing more and more competition, and it's causing wages to continually go down or stay stagnant for the most part. And then on top of that, you have inflation. So the cost of everything is going, I mean, we have inflation's at around like 6% right now, they're saying. And the minimum wage, yeah, it's pegged to inflation, but $12.32 an hour. So that's a lot to unpack there, but you can talk about it for as long as you want.
I think that you asked me, like 50 million questions. Yeah. So I'm going to tease you a little bit because Jeff does not live in the city of Aurora. Okay. Minimum wage in the city of Aurora, as you said, is $12 and is it 32 cents? Yeah. A couple of things. Minimum wage is just that. It was fixed to be a starting wage. It is not the average wage in Aurora. Look that up because you were kind enough to ask me that before, and I thought I need to do a little more work. The average wage is about $16 an hour. So, and we have to remember that minimum wage is a starting wage. When I was growing up, minimum wage is the first thing that you made basically while you were still in high school. You didn't even have to be out of that. And that was much more than I made babysitting, for instance. So it was intended to be a starting wage. And you were intended to be able to build that wealth over time and over some sense of expertise as you honed your craft, as you got better, as you got promoted. And I still see that happening. There have been things that have affected our minimum wage. One is a need for more employees in the service sector. So that wage has gone from minimum to average to increasing just to be competitive. So I would argue that it's not really a fair thing to say that the average wage in Aurora is $12.32 because it's just not. It is more than that. And as we see competition ratcheted up, particularly in our service sector, and by that I mean delivery drivers, I mean frontline grocery store folks, people that work in restaurants, those are all good service sector jobs, and they're becoming more and more competitive by their employers, as well as adding some benefits. Mm-hmm. Somebody like now can work at Starbucks and they can get an education component. So there are some definite advantages that we're seeing here in our community.
Okay. So what do you think of when we get back to the Jeff Bezos, the $200 billion? It seems as though too much of the percentage of the profits are going up to the top. And I don't know if you believe in Reaganomics, trickle down, because you can argue that, okay, well, they're creating the jobs, so the job creators are creating the jobs so that job wouldn't be there to begin with, so they should have the freedom to allocate the money as freely as they want. But you've got Amazon warehouse workers who are working really hard, and I would argue just because they're not getting paid that much doesn't mean that they don't have a soul. It doesn't mean that they don't get up in the morning just like everyone else. They're a human being, and they need to be treated like a human being. And so they work hard too. They may not be, according to society, worth as much as Jeff Bezos, but they're putting in the hours, they're putting in the sweat, they're putting in the blood, they're putting in the sacrifice, and then it's almost like there's nothing to show for it. So what do you think of profit sharing? I know that this was a big debate when Hillary was running against Trump. And do you think there needs to be a better distribution among the blue-collar workers?
A couple of things. Number one, I believe that people have the right to own their own companies and run them as such, as well as you have the right to work for them or not. There's a good deal of diversity. I know that there are some folks that don't choose to work for some brands because they don't care for their labor practices. They don't want to work there. They don't want to shop there. It carries through to their values, their situations. And they have that right. They have the right to choose to not do that. I don't believe that we have the right to tell people that you have to do this when it's their company. I think we can encourage models of being a good corporate citizen, if you will. I think that we can encourage best practices type of thing as protections for employees. But to tell me because I make more money than you do that I have to share all of that money, that's not the job of government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you think of, so in Denver they've implemented the camping ban, and so like for instance, right before the Major League All-Star game, they did a big sweep because they didn't want anyone to see coming in from all across the country that Denver has a real homelessness problem, and it's the same thing with Aurora. But we're not. I don't know if we're not really sweeping like Denver is. As far as I know, I may be totally wrong on that. Maybe you could enlighten me on that. But again, these people are humans just like everyone else. I believe that the land was given to us by God. I don't think anyone should have control over land. But of course that can breed anarchy, and so you have to have civilization, and I get that. But what do you think of the Kaufman ban? It hasn't passed yet, probably won't pass, but the ideology matters as to what's the plan, because there's no place to put them. They have created open spaces for people to go. And then also, do you think that people should be allowed to sleep in their cars in public parking lots? Because at the last debate, Heather Gardner's debate, John Ronquillo says, oh, well, cars aren't safe to be in. You can't stay in a car. A car isn't safe to stay in? Are you kidding me? A car is safer than a house practically. A car gets struck by lightning, you're safe because of the rubber tires. So I just think that, I'm sorry to call out John Ronquillo, but I had to. So sleeping in the car in public parking lot. And also, if you have your own private property, do you think you should be allowed to pitch a tent and not have a house on that property as long as you're keeping it clean? And what's the plan for the homelessness? I know that the city of Aurora is planning on doing creating a shelter within the next 2 to 3 years. How does the housing, the mental health, the addiction, how do we get all that stuff under control and sink it so that the homelessness is eradicated?
You gave the perfect segue, and that's that homelessness is not a one-size-all-fits problem. There are a number of people that are homeless for very, very different reasons. Some are homeless by choice, and by that I mean they may have factors that they do not wish to live in any kind of institutional living, if you will. And that's what I mean by it is by choice. Others find themselves as single parents, no income, they were laid off, they've got 3 children, and they literally are sleeping in their cars because they have nowhere else to live. We're not going to find a one-size-fits-all answer to our homeless issue. Homelessness is also not just an Aurora issue or a Denver issue or a Colorado issue. We're seeing it all over. And we need to be smart. We need to determine what fiscal resources that we have, how we can partner with people to answer some of these issues. But again, one size does not fit all. I do applaud the mayor for bringing up something that he thought, we've got to address this homelessness. I think that had I been on council, my encouragement would go, okay, let's talk about how. Let's talk about a mechanism. Let's talk about something we can work together as a community, along with housing authorities, that we can work with some of the folks that are being displaced, if you will. So it's not just us telling them, it's them helping us understand what's going to work for me. We can work with our communities of faith. Our churches have been amazing advocates, particularly during COVID, on bringing people in, helping people, administering to their needs. Let's incorporate some of their best practices as well. We also need something that law enforcement can get behind and advocate. That it doesn't make sense to me to have a policy or an ordinance and say it's not enforceable. It doesn't. But I do applaud the mayor for saying we've got to do something. But here's what it is.
Did you think it was cool, like what he did when he went out and became homeless for a week? Like, do you think that's a good way to figure out what really is going on? Did you like that?
I did. I thought that was a courageous move on his part. Being homeless for 1 week is very, very different than being homeless, period. I think about that show, Undercover Boss. Did you ever see that show? Where the boss of a corporation goes incognito into his own business or her own business and determines what it's like to work for the person in charge. I think that gave our mayor some insight as far as what it would be like to spend time on the streets. He couldn't do that for a long extended time because he has a different job. But there are some nuances that you learn by doing something like that you would have never known. What I heard from the mayor are things like, I was amazed at the generosity of people. I was amazed that people would just bring food. It wasn't organized. They would just stop and bring something to eat. And remember, it was very cold during that period of time. It was between Christmas and New Year's. And as you know, it can be very cold in Colorado. And I see that. I even see it where I live. I live here in Heather Garden, and just down the street at Vaughn and the Dam Road, there's a number of tent encampments there. And it's important, I think, to understand how people are treated, what some of their issues are. I think that one of the concerns of mine is the amount, there's not restroom facilities. There's no place to clean up. There's not even really trash cans. And all of that is just either left or can is kind of spread out in an area that is not owned by the camper, if you will. So there's some responsibility on their part, I believe. I'm also a property advocates person. If I own that property, in my mind, I get to say what happens on that property.
So I got a question, but so I was canvassing the other day, and this guy was like, yeah, I was keeping my truck in my driveway, and my neighbor complained about it, and the city made me take the truck off of my driveway, so now he has to pay for a parking spot somewhere else. Do you think that's fair? If my truck is on my own property, and if it's an eyesore for someone else, that's your problem. This is my own private property. Do you believe that should stand? If the truck is on my property, right, I should be able to do what I should be able to keep my truck there, don't you? That's what I believe. What do you? But that's not how it works in Aurora.
Well, I think it depends on where the truck is.
So if it's an eyesore, get it off.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
I think it depends on where you are. There are certainly homeowner associations, HOAs, and they may have different rules. In Heather Gardens, for instance, the HOA says you only can park your car for a specific period of time. It cannot exceed X number of days, and then you have to move it. So I think that I can't answer that question because I don't know all of the nuances of that. I also don't know if it's, a 4x4 pickup, or if you're talking about a truck being a semi. So you can't just say that, and that comes from experience on planning and zoning.
Okay. So that's
I happen to be a planning commissioner.
Okay, so here we go. So public transportation, RTD,
yes,
housing, public housing. I mean, it just makes sense for us to build affordable housing, government subsidized housing right on the light rail, because the people that ride the light rail who need the light rail the most, most of them don't have or a lot of them don't have cars, so it makes more sense to build housing that is for those people who don't own cars, so that it makes it easier for them to get to and from work. And RTD accountability whatever board recommended that we need to get that in sync, RTD with affordable housing. So what's the plan? Do you agree with that? Or do you believe in the free market more so than, do you think government shouldn't be building affordable housing? Or
what was done in the city of Aurora is called transit-oriented development, and it was a very specific higher density along the light rail stops. So you have 9 Mile down here, which is basically Parker Road and Peoria-ish, Dartmouth area. So the folks that are developing that are developing housing, and it is high-density housing. The high-density housing allows for a lifestyle choice. These folks commute. They don't spend as much time in their homes. They usually recreate outdoors. They count on light rail. They have an active life in the city, but they can move down to Aurora and have all of that accessibility. Mm-hmm. They hardly need to drive. That's the kind of encouragement that these light rail stops offer. They also, again, they're going to appeal to a little different generation. Now, I literally can walk 15 minutes at max. I can hoof it up and hop on a light rail stop. And it's great for me. I don't have to drive downtown anymore. But for someone your age, it's awesome for you. You don't need, 1,000, you don't really even need 1,500 square feet. You're good because you're an outdoor liver. You enjoy doing recreational types of things. You like the community of others that are your age with your demographic. You enjoy all of that. And those are perfect market models for you.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that, so the city of Aurora is receiving $65 million from the federal government? At the end of the day, it's kind of just a drop in the ocean, but do you think we should take that money and put it into more frequent buses, more frequent bus stops, more bus stops, more frequent stops? And also, do you think we need to, I think that the bike trail system is pretty amazing in Aurora, but do you think we need to start to emphasize biking more, and also where else do you think that money should go? That 65 million.
Well, as you may know, the city of Aurora has on their website the ability for people to chime in on where they think that money should go. And I hope that they do, because your silent voice is just that. You've got to be able to get involved and say, this is where I think that we need these funds to go. We partner with people like RTD. We do not own them. We don't get to manage where they stop, what they stop, how they stop. I think that we can advocate for them. I know that Bob Broom, we have Paul. There are a number of RTD folks that are reps for the city of Aurora, and we need to work through them. What to do with that money? I think that's going to be the big question, honestly, over the next 4 to 6 months, both for our existing council and for our new council. Mm-hmm. So it's important to understand what opportunities are there. It's important to do our homework to see that we can maximize that. And by that, I mean working with our partners. We've got to be able to do a better job with our partners, because that's how you create wealth for our citizens. You match their money and our money, and you do something great for basically the most in the city of Aurora. That could be roadway improvements, that could be roadway expansion. Our roads are not in great shapes here. If you drive a lot, you will see a number of roads that need to be improved. We have a transportation shortage that we need road maintenance. Mm-hmm. As far as bike lanes, you talked about alternatives. Every time that you see a new development, bike lanes and amenities like that, sidewalks, wider sidewalks, are a part of those, because that's what happens when we develop and we redevelop. So those things come as development or redevelopment happen, because we have codes and policies that champion that. We want to be a multimodal city.
Nice. Okay, so just recently the City Council, Allison Coombs, introduced the Climate Action Committee, which she wanted to abolish the Oil and Gas Committee, and then she found out that the City Council would not do that, and so she said, okay, well, let's merge the Oil and Gas Committee, let's have both the Oil and Gas Committee and a Climate Action Change Committee. But the Republicans voted that down, and it was among party lines. But obviously climate change is a big issue. So if you were on council, would you have voted in favor of Allison Coombs' Climate Action Committee?
I would have to understand from Councilmember Coombs a little more about what her expectation is. You can have a Climate Action Committee, or you can do an exploratory committee. And again, what the exploratory committee does is let you take a look at what the city is currently doing, because I think you have to start there. What's Aurora currently doing? What policies do we have in place to incent or discourage waste? Whatever the waste.
Do you think climate change is real? Do you think global warming is caused by humans? The carbon footprint is just getting exponentially worse because of humans, and is that in turn causing global warming?
I don't know that. I honestly don't know that. I do believe that we have things like carbon footprints. I do believe that we need to be responsible for our environment, period. We just need to be good stewards of our land. Whether or not, my concern is that the word climate change has become so polarized that its intent is lost in the fact that it's become a partisan issue. And I think that those issues...
So you think there should be a place for oil and gas and for green tech?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Mm-hmm. I do think that as we continue the electric vehicle production, that we need to think of stations, where they will be, how easily it is accommodated. Those are some of the policies I do think that we could do and work with private companies. I originally worked, in fact, probably literally from its conception, I worked with Fine Airport Parking, which is up by the airport. It's north on Jackson Gap at about 60th. And it's airport parking facility. It was brand new, did everything with that facility. It was like my baby. Tesla came in and they said, we'll give you all of the equipment that you need. All you need to do is basically do, a conduit carrier line so that we have electricity to this. We'll do all of the rest. It's wonderful. We've got 12 stations up there. Some are just Tesla. Some have expanded beyond for any electric vehicle. So that's coming. Good office space is going to do that, just because they're going to give variety to people that we didn't have. My building is 37, almost 40 years old. We didn't have that. That's one of the things that Heather Garden is saying. We would love to have electronic stations here in Heather Garden. And frankly, we can afford electric vehicles.
Okay. So what about big tech? So big tech is, I know you're not going to be dealing with this, but it'll let us kind of know where you're going here with your ideology and everything. So Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, they could very well be considered to be monopolies. They're anti-competitive. They're worth more than major countries. They're kind of creepy. They're censoring you. They know more about you than you know about yourself. They've kind of hacked God. But maybe you like what they have. They've got great products and services. They earned it, blah, blah, blah. But now they're kind of getting intermingled with the government too. So like Amazon and Microsoft are working with the Pentagon and the CIA, and it's just getting a little like in China, you have too much government, but then you could make an argument that in the US you have too much private enterprise. But what's going on is that it's getting fused into one. So the government is becoming big tech, and that's when it gets really dangerous. It gets foggy. But so what do you think about that? Do you think that these companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, they're too big to fail? And therefore they have to be broken up?
First of all,
go ahead, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Nobody's too big to fail. Nobody. It's just life. And these folks will cycle like many other people and not many other corporations.
So you think there's enough competition out there to compete against them?
I don't think that is a municipal decision. Let me tell you what I do think is a municipal decision. I think that everybody should have access to internet.
Okay.
Regardless of the
Oh my God, I have CenturyLink. It's just awful.
So in my mind, I like the competition, but I also do think that there are some baseline amenities, if you will, that have now become necessities. I think that during COVID, we saw that extremely evident, particularly with our children, where we had children that we were requiring to go to school online, but they didn't have the internet capacity, whether it wasn't provided or their parents couldn't afford it, for them to keep up with school. So that's the type of thing that I think, as far as a policy, those are the types of things that we want to strive for, because it does produce both equality and, in some neighborhoods, equity.
Okay. Gosh, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. We basically covered everything. There was one thing I wanted to... campaign finance.
Yes.
So, but that ties into big tech, because big tech, they're just lobbying like crazy. right? Like Jeff Bezos has the biggest, most valuable house in Washington D.C. is Jeff Bezos's house, and he owns the Washington Post, which is it's just not fair. But yeah, campaign finance, Marcano Johnston just recently passed that. Do you like it? I know that. So Mayor Kaufman sues the city. It's some of our taxpayer money is going toward fighting Mayor Mike Kaufman. That's just really pisses me off. So, but maybe you think that's just my opinion. Maybe you think it was the right thing to do, and I'm still trying to figure. If you go in and read that legislation, it takes forever to figure it out. So I think it still needs major changes. But before it was the Wild Wild West. There were no guidelines or regulations around it. It was just free for all. But what do you think of Marcano Johnston legislation for campaign finance, or would you have voted for it? And if not, what do you think of Kaufman suing the city? Do you agree with him that it's unconstitutional? Those two things that he disagreed with, I don't even know what they are because I'm too lazy to look it up.
My favorite thing is you ask like 12 questions.
Yeah, sorry, I asked 12 questions in like 30 seconds. Yeah, ready, set, go.
All right, let's talk about the new campaign ordinance. A couple of things. Number one, Johnston and Marcano did champion that, but City Council approved that. So I do think that I just want to make sure that people understand it was more than two. So the majority of City Council approved that ordinance. Number two, I think that practically speaking, because it is new and it was enacted upon someone like me that's running this year, it is complicated. It was very complicated getting through. Would I have championed it? Yeah, parts of it I think are fine. I don't have any problem with the reporting mechanisms. I don't have any problem really even with capping.
So it's better than the way it was before.
It's different because...
But different in a good way.
No, practically it is. I don't think that it did what Marcano and Johnston had originally hoped. And my guess is that they would agree with that. I can't speak for them, but here's my guess. I believe that Councilmember Marcano and at the time Councilmember Johnston were really hoping that this would allow more grassroots folks to run for city council because it limited what basically companies or corporations or LLCs could give. Practically speaking, that hasn't been the case. It didn't do that at all. And in fact, as council candidates, we've raised more in this election than any at large. So if that was the intent, it didn't make it.
So do you think that you should be allowed to receive money from out of state?
I think that you should be allowed to receive a capped amount of money so everybody plays on the same field.
So you think there should be a limit as to how much you're allowed to
I actually do, because
Okay.
what is bothersome to me is when we talk about being fiscal conservatives and caring about our community, and we raise what I would consider ungodly amounts on campaigns. And there's only so many mailers that you can get. I mean, it's just a logistic. I would personally rather see an amount that is capped, so running at large does cost more than running an award, but let's cap it, and then as a disclosure, I have to tell you exactly who gave me that money. Whether I got it from one person, or whether I got it from 50 or 1,000.
But it's not set up that way.
It's not set up that way. There is no cap.
But in terms of reporting, who gives you the money?
We have to report everything on who gives us the
There are
money.
no loopholes?
And I have no problem with the reporting mechanism. That hasn't been difficult. I think that it just wasn't the intent. And the truth be told, in my perspective, and it's only my perspective, generally speaking, Republicans can raise more money. Generally speaking, Democrats get more feet on the ground help.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So
it balances, is what some of that balances. I may have raised more money than one of my Democrat counterparts, but they may have so much help than I do that it really does balance.
Mm-hmm. So why do you want to run primarily? So actually, no, I want to ask you one other question. So
Yes.
the device, I know that your number one is you're just really mad about the divisiveness, and it's just getting really ugly on the city council, and so you want to be one of these people that comes in here and provides civility.
I do.
Do you actually think you're gonna
That's a
be
great
able
question.
to do that?
I had one of our Arapahoe County commissioners said, Becky, a lot of people have gone before you and said they can fix the problem. What makes you different? What makes you think you can?
So what's connected to this is the only way I believe you can do it is that if you're willing to reach across the aisle and be bipartisan and agree with Democrats on some things, and vice versa. So are there some things that you would be able to agree with Democrats on?
Absolutely. There are things that I would work with my fellow Democrats. So we talk about compromise. Number one, it begins with respecting the individuals, regardless of their partisan politics on city council. I've had the advantage of having those relationships with all of council. Part of it was because I had a husband that was excellent at that, and he knew that it was how things got done. I think that one of the biggest losses, other than personal to me, when Stephen was no longer the mayor, was watching our council divide as it may. It doesn't mean that things were perfect when he was mayor, but he spent a great deal of time and effort bringing people to that one Aurora. And it was clear by how the council was managed. It wasn't swinging to the right or wasn't swinging to the left, and it certainly wasn't paralyzed in the middle. And it's an art. It's an art of working with people, working with relationships. Sometimes you get, like any relationship, sometimes you get cookies and water, and sometimes
Oh, by the
you
way,
have to share
Becky
them
made
with
these
others.
amazing cookies for me, and she said they weren't baked. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? I should know since I'm a millennial. This is like very innovative, but do you want to just let them know?
Oh, it's
what
no-bake
happened?
cookies. Honestly, you probably should have them. I had them in elementary school when I was a child, and you literally don't bake them. You make them on a stovetop. And because they have oatmeal, I think you can eat them for breakfast. I think it makes it okay.
I might vote for you just because you gave me these cookies.
I should hope so.
All right, so civility. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
Oh my gosh. Well, again, I think that, and if you look at our existing council, people talk about how they're polarized on everything. That's not true. Just go back and look at their votes. There are a number of things that they all have been in unison. And then there are a few things that they have not. And the goal is to be able to work, set aside for me, what is not my voice, but it's what the residents, the community of Aurora wants. I think that one of the biggest temptations for politicians is excelling their own voice and not that of their constituents. It's a big temptation to have your own opinion.
Yeah.
And you can't. If you're going to be good at what you do, you can't. And sometimes residents or constituents are going to choose something that I don't. And I can have those conversations, but in the end, it's their voice. That's the beauty to me, by the way, of having wards and at large.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're probably gonna wrap this thing up, but so we're gonna do a lightning round. Is that cool with you? You don't have to. You can pass if you're not sure if you want to answer it. Is that cool? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. First question is, what's your favorite book?
Oh, pass.
Take some time to think about it. Don't worry about time. I have all day here.
Okay.
So you can.
I'll let you know. I'll email you what my favorite book is.
Okay, she'll email.
For the
I'll get.
time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your favorite philosopher? That's a tough question.
It is
To ask
a
someone that on the
tough
spot, I mean, that's
question.
really putting you on the hot spot.
It is a tough question. I have to think about that.
Okay,
I have
even.
one in mind, but I do have to think about that.
Okay. Who is your favorite entrepreneur? They can be living or dead.
They could be living or dead. Probably Ben Franklin, because he changed a literal century with some of his innovation.
Okay. So, what is your favorite kind of food?
I love Asian food.
Okay. What kind of Asian food? Oh, we didn't talk about that. Let's talk about virtual Koreatown.
Koreatown is awesome. It is just great. And why don't you reach in my little box and show everybody what the Koreatown logo is?
Oh, that's cool. There it is, everyone. Do you know the website?
We are just formulating the website right
Virtual
now.
Koreatown. So it's a way for you to look up Korean restaurants and
Entertainment, little bars, karaoke, all of the things that our Asian community offers us here in Aurora. Koreatown was originally a brainchild of Councilmember Gruber and a gentleman in our Korea community by the name of Peter Lee. And they said, let's get a Koreatown. We already have distinct Korea businesses in a certain part of Aurora. Let's do this. Well, it blew up kind of too big, and people were concerned about regulations, and there were a number of things.
because it was going to be along the Havana. It was going to be physical.
Yes.
But people thought it was unfair because there are other cuisines there, not just Korean.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And it just kind of it needed to be put on hold. Sometimes the best ideas that you have just need to simmer, and Koreatown was one of them. Mm-hmm. During COVID, when our Korea committee wasn't able to travel anymore or send delegations or host delegations, particularly with our youth, we took that time to reinvest in Koreatown.
Nice. So Aurora is like 5% Korean, something like that?
Oh, it will be much higher when the census comes out. I believe that Koreans are one of the largest minority communities. Korean, Ethiopians, and El Salvadorians make up the largest of our minority communities. And that does not include Hispanics, just to be clear. They just do, as far as our immigrant communities. But the bottom line with Koreatown is we went back, we did a grassroots effort, we went to our Korea community, we got input from our city, we got input from the chamber, from Visit Aurora, Havana Bid, all kind of stakeholders in this process. We went to market, we got a designer that happened to be American Korean, and she gave us different values, different looks, different concepts. And again, we went back to our group of stakeholders and we said, what do you think? They voted, and ultimately our Korea committee picked that design. And again, we're so excited about this. Next step, we needed to raise money to market it. So we had a Korean golf tournament. I was so sorry you couldn't make that.
Way too early
awesome.
In the morning. Yeah,
it was way early.
I'm still working on becoming grown up, even though I'm 40. I slept in like a baby.
No, it was just awesome. And I mean, we raised about $10,000, maybe $12,000. Not quite sure yet, because the numbers haven't come in. And with that, we're going to look at printing logos and really putting up a website and really starting to market this as a virtual concept. The other thing that we said with this is anybody who wants to do this, if it's the Ethiopians, the Somalians, the Senegalese, anybody, if it were the Latinos, you pick, they can come to us. We will give you everything. No charge. Here you go. Here's the template. Here's what we did. And here is how we can champion you doing the same effort. Ultimately, we'd love to see Aurora as branded as truly an international city, because we are.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to do it. It's relatively inexpensive. It's perfect.
Nice.
So
nice.
we're very, very excited
Yeah.
about that.
Okay, so back to the lightning round.
Okay, sorry.
So, gosh, well, so your husband was the mayor of Aurora, Steve
Yes.
Hogan. So, aside from your husband being your favorite politician, who is your favorite politician? They can be dead or alive.
Living or dead?
Yeah.
Probably Abraham Lincoln, because he had one of the hardest jobs in a very, very divided country, and he had to maneuver between his one country of the United States, but bring them together when they were very, very apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it is extremely hard to do. And I guess one of the things that I would say about Aurora is the further you are apart, the harder that task becomes. So let's not get further apart.
Mm-hmm.
When Stephen ran for office in 2011 for mayor, one of his campaign identities was One Aurora. And he was talking about the northeastern portion of the city being one with North Aurora and with Aurora Central and with the southeast portion of Aurora. His concern was maintaining a geographical oneness for our city. For me, this year, my concern is that our community does not become more partisan and that we still remain one Aurora, because that is in the best interest of our residents, our business community, and ultimately our metropolitan region, if we are one.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of one, how would you describe Aurora in one word?
In one word, well, I always think of Aurora as great.
Nice. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Is there anything else you would like to talk about? Maybe your childhood, maybe a little more about your background, or because I had trouble finding that online.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was born in Seoul, Korea. I was left on the street. I'm a post-Korean War baby. And as you may or may not know, the country of South Korea was devastated during the Korean War. And it was a country that had no income. Poverty was rampant. Kids that did not have homes were virtually destined to perish. I happened to be left on a street and taken to an orphanage, and I was adopted at 5 months. I came over in a literal fruit box. So, cardboard box, here comes baby. My parents are white. They had 2 children of their own, and they actually adopted 3 of us, all at different times, but we are all 3 the same age. So, I've got an older brother and sister, and I have what I call the younger brother and sister.
So were the 3, were they all Korean? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
all 3 of us were Korean.
Okay.
So 2 Caucasian, 3 Korean. And the 3 Koreans are all the same age. And I'm 6 weeks older than my sister, and I'm 6 months older than my brother. So I'm the big sister.
Yeah.
Yes.
So did you come straight to Colorado, or?
I went to Michigan.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then my parents, at the age of 5 years old, they adopted my sister, the one that's 6 weeks younger than I am. And my sister, we moved to Portland, Oregon, because my sister is a double amputee. She has no arm and no leg, and they needed the help of Shriners Hospital. And Shriners Hospital took amazing care of my sister. So I grew up there, moved to Colorado about 30 years ago, met my husband and married him,
Nice.
moved to Aurora and fell in love with
Nice.
the family here.
What made you want to get into, so economic development is your forte? You're just fascinated by it, or you just kind of ended up?
I've done property management, so I understood, the residential and commercial real estate. from that, I got a job at Brookfield Economic Development, which is a public-private economic development agency, much like Aurora EDC.
EDC,
Economic Development.
Okay.
So it's a public-private partnership, and in Brookfield, that's how they do their economic development, as a public-private partnership. I actually think they may recently have taken that in. But I guess my tie here is that on that, I was on the city side. So I helped people that were from the private sector develop property. I helped them grow their business. I provided them the tools that they needed from a city's perspective. And I saw how developers struggled with city speak. The timing was different. What their needs going through the process, it was a cumbersome process for them. A small business would come in and they wanted to expand their business. They knew very well how to run their business, but they had no idea how to get through a city process. When I wrapped up my economic development career, I changed sides of the table. So it would be like you and I switched places. And I helped people with what I called city speak. I helped them get through a process. Because if you understand the process, it is much easier to navigate it. If you don't, everything seems to be a fight. It slows down, and sometimes you end up walking away from something that's great. That's the uniqueness that I bring that no other candidate brings. There is an art to do this, and I spent 30 years honing that art.
So I know that I said I was going to wrap it up, but I have ADD and I'm all over the place here, and because this is actually what I wanted to mention more than anything else, because for disclosure, I am invested in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but it's kind of tied into economic development a little bit. So Marcano, he wants public banking. I don't like it because I like the idea of people having control over their own money. So I believe that I should be my own bank. I believe that my money should be saved in my hard drive. Don't touch my money. And then also it's the idea that like I can use that money to make more money I can use my money to lend to someone else and earn interest on it instead of the bank doing it. Why can't we can do it on an individual basis. You can still do that now, but so what do you think of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies versus like having public banking? Is public banking the exact opposite of crypto? And I mean, do you know or have you done a deep dive into crypto yet?
Zero.
Okay. But what do you think of global currency? So it's basically like kind of like Bitcoin is like digital gold. But do you think the US dollar should be the world's currency? Isn't that kind of...
Again, I think that it's much like we've talked about business. I believe that you have the right to dictate something like that. I don't think it's that hard for me. I travel a lot. I love to travel. It's my thing. Going around the world is my thing. And I don't think it's hard to convert currency. I just don't. I don't think that that's near as hard as what people make it to be. Is there a cost differential? Yes. Does it have a different value? Yes. But you need to be, that's just part of basic education.
Okay.
So
what do you think of public banking?
Here's my challenge with public banking. My challenge is that sometimes you will end up with a conflict of interest there. And
do you think that would be good for microfinancing?
I think that there are ways that you can right. I think that again, you're getting into what is your core objective as a city. In my mind, it's public safety, it's roadways, it's transportation. Right. But I mean, those are some of the core things that as a city we need to do, and we need to do it well before we start doing some of the things that we don't do as well.
Okay.
I think that cities are, at times, they think that they're the best to do everything, and you only can do so much.
Yeah. So public safety, violent crime has gone up, I think like 32%. Nonviolent crime has gone up like 22%. So we had 58 homicides last year. Okay. 58 out of 380,000 people. That means 0.02% of the people in Aurora last year died due to homicide, due to murder. 0.02%. But yet everyone's worried about public safety when 0.02% of the people are dying from murders. I don't think that's not dangerous. I feel very safe in Aurora. I did canvassing. I was dropping lit at midnight. My bike got stolen. And my car got stolen, but I got my car back. I didn't get my bike back. My bike matters more to me than my car, but whatever. So, but seriously, 0.02% of the people in Aurora last year died because of murder? Is public safety really that big of a deal? I think the problem is that we have a shortage of police. But you gotta pay them more. If you pay them more, then that solves the problem. You're gonna get more police. But all right, so public safety, policing, where do we go with this? Obviously with Elijah McClain, with all of that stuff. The floor is yours. Paint us a picture.
I'm a huge community safety advocate. I believe that our residents want to feel safe. And I think with some of the thefts, I think that to some point, the homeless / the unhoused, I think that there are a lot of things that have bred fear. When there was damage done to City Hall, it bred fear into people. And I think that our community has to feel safe again.
But you don't think it's the government and the media injecting that fear into the people because they don't want people to be talking about the stuff that really matters? A lot more than that, in my opinion, which is housing, healthcare, public transportation.
It's a combination. Again, I live at Heather Gardens. The average age is probably 70-something. And if one person's car is stolen from the garage that I park in right next door to my car, it breeds fear for the people that live here in my building. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that becomes a focus point of theirs. When we hear the drag racing, it breeds fear to some folks.
I can't concentrate. I have ADD as it is. I can't concentrate.
I can't even imagine what it would be like to be you.
It's all over the place. Like this freaking interview, yeah.
No, that's okay. I like that.
It's innovative, I think. It's innovative.
But I think that the bottom line is that, for me, public safety needs to be broadened here in Aurora. We do need more. We need to build back our police force. We need to offer, whether it's pay or benefits, to make sure that we are competitive, that we keep our ratio, our 2 per 1,000 ratio, and to some point that we plan to increase that as our city grows. Mm-hmm. So that's a big, big deal. But the other part of it is that we need that community empowerment. We need our community to be more involved.
Well, the problem is no one's paying attention because they don't have time, they have kids, whatever, they've got their job. And I watch every city council meeting like a hawk, and you can watch it on YouTube and it'll show the amount of views. Right. No one is paying attention. No one's tuning in. So it averages maybe 50 to 70 views out of 380,000 people living in Aurora. On average, there's 50 to 70 views on YouTube per city council. Like when I interviewed John Scott, he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't really watch the meetings. I'm usually out on a date with my wife." I'm like, "You're running for city. I mean, I'm sure you can watch the replay and everything, but come on, guys.
No, every Monday night.
I'm a political junkie. I'm just surprised that no one else is."
So here is what I think one of the things that was good about COVID, in my opinion, is that it almost forced you to get to know your neighbor. And as such, because before, You know, you would come in, you'd hit your garage door opener, you'd drive in, you'd occasionally wave, but that was it. You really didn't
so it's
know
like hyper
your neighbor.
individualism. So that's a part of the American way. It's a microcosm of America. It's part of our culture. So we're we got to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. It's individualistic. You get home from work, you're tired, you're gonna stare at your phone, watch videos on Facebook.
Whatever,
Okay.
yes. But when we were at home, when we worked at home, when we lived at home, where we didn't really go out of our neighborhood bubble, all of a sudden we get to know our neighbors. And that brings a different sense of a relationship. So before, when I thought it might be intrusive or forced if I have to talk to you, now I just enjoy talking to you.
Oh,
So
thank
that
you.
the next time that I go on my camping trip, I'm like, hey, do you mind just we're going to be gone for about 4 days. Just kind of keep your eye out on the house. Absolutely. And they do that. And that's where we
Yeah.
build back those relationships. That's what I mean by community. Again, we involve our churches, we involve neighborhood associations, knocking on doors. I see, you know, neighborhood watch signs. They're probably 15, 20 years old. And we've forgotten some of that. We need to get back to some of that. We need to know our neighbor. We need to be our brother's keeper in so many ways
Yeah.
that can make us better
Do you
individuals.
think that the diversity is actually it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing too because it's hard for us to assimilate to each other because we all come from different cultures, and because of that, because of different cultures, it makes it harder to unite as one.
No, I think
Okay.
that it may give us different challenges, but I think it's the diversity that makes us great. I lived in High Point, which is north of 56th and east of Dunkirk, and it was one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of Aurora. At the time that we lived there, my husband was truly, as a white Caucasian male, he was a minority there. And it was one of our favorite parts of living in that community because the diversity created areas of interest, areas of dialogue, and a lot of times you will find how much you have in common as opposed to those things that are different.
So you think Aurora should be a sanctuary city? Do you know what that is?
I do know what
Yeah.
that is. I don't think Aurora has to be labeled as a sanctuary city to be a sanctuary city.
Okay. Do you think the rate of immigration? Do you want the rate of immigration to go up in Aurora,
I
or
think
do you want it to go down, or do you not really care?
I want to make sure that we have the resources for people to come into our community, be a part of our community, and thrive.
And so, do you want
to
that?
me, it's a resource as well as just people migrating and not having jobs, not
Yeah.
having housing, not having the resources that they need to
But
live.
don't you think we kind of already have that problem? So if we have more people coming in, and that's what economic development entails, more people coming in. If we already have that problem and everyone wants more economic development and the system's not working now, then I don't know. So,
Part of economic development, though, because you have deemed that as bad, I deem that as good because I look at that creating balanced communities. And it's about that. The city of Aurora has policies to create balanced communities, and they do that via zoning, they do that via a comprehensive land use plan. They mediate how we grow.
and we'll probably get more money from the federal government if we have more immigration. So,
You generate more money
okay.
when you grow because
From
people
the federal government
invest.
and from entrepreneurship.
Sometimes from entrepreneurship, sometimes from private sector money. Developers come in, they build roadways, they expand city services, city infrastructure on their dime, then they give it back to the city. So without that, again, we become stagnant. It is the infamous escalator. It's moving, and you
So you're in
cannot
favor. So
be
Juan Marcano
stagnant.
wrote a letter to Joe Biden about bringing more Afghans here, the Afghan refugees. So you're in favor of that?
I don't know. I have to look again. I have to look at what the impact is to our existing residents. That's a conversation to be had with the community that I'm not sure that I can opine on until I know how our community feels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the other thing is with immigration. So you said that you kind of indirectly said you don't have a problem with sanctuary, meaning that if someone is here illegally, as long as they don't have a criminal background except for the fact that they're here illegally and they're being productive, that you don't have a problem with it. But people would argue that it's kind of driving down wages. And
what I would love to see.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
So the problem is that the companies that are hiring illegals, if they get caught, it's not really being enforced. So, but if they do get caught and it is a deal, then they just pay like a fine and it's no big deal. And that's a problem because American citizens are getting screwed because of it. In my opinion, I may be wrong, wages are going down partially because of that, immigration and globalization and technology. So how do we solve that then?
What I would like to see is, on a federal level, a clear path to citizenship.
Okay.
My guess would be if you or I took a citizenship test right now, I'm not sure that either one of us would pass it.
So I would not. I would not pass it.
And I think that I would like to see the federal government make an easier pathway to citizenship. But that then allows people to be documented. It allows us to look at what resources are needed, as opposed to have no idea. Mm-hmm. It's not different than feeding my family. I just want to know how many people are coming for dinner so that I can prepare enough. If I don't know, that doesn't help me, and somebody's going to get shorted of food, right. And it could be everybody that gets shorted of food because I just didn't know. Mm-hmm.
Did you vote for Donald Trump?
I never disclose who I voted for, ever.
Okay. All right, yeah, well, so that's pretty much it. Is there anything else you would like to talk about?
You asked me as far as diversity when I started to cry it. I think that for our city, adversity. Yeah. For myself, it was, of course, the loss of my husband. That was huge to me because it happened very quickly. The advantage that I had that others don't have is that I had time to say goodbye. I also had to watch him die. Where others, they lose their loved one very quick and they didn't have the chance to say goodbye. But then they were gone. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think for our city, the adversity came on 7/20. I always get teary when I talk about 7/20 because the impact was huge. You know, next year in 2022, it will be 10 years, similar to this year with 9/11. It'll be 20. It's just hard to imagine that it's gone that quickly. But I will remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember everything that happened from the phone call, you know, just after 2 o'clock in the morning to our home. And mind you, my husband had only been the mayor since really the third week of November. And all of a sudden, he gets a call in the middle of the night saying that this happened. And it was an attack on our whole community. I don't know if you lived here then, but it was so personal to the city. And the city was so hurt. And this was one of the first, unfortunately, among many that followed. But our city was amazing in their response. Was it perfect? No, nothing is perfect. What happened wasn't perfect. But the city of Aurora was amazing in terms of response, their care, their love for their entire community. And I don't think that you ever can pay something like that back. You can't. You never can serve enough to make that great again. But I saw Aurora at its very best amongst that kind of tragedy. So as far as diversity, I know that we can be great because we were.
Mhm.
And there's nothing then that really gathers the human heart other than adversity.
Mhm.
So I am hoping that that is going to be the case that drives Aurora forward in this election, because our future is bright. We simply have lost our way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it looks like we're going to end it there, and ended up being a really good talk. That was awesome, and hopefully we can talk again at some point, Becky. I think the people of Aurora really appreciated getting the chance to hear from you. And yeah, so the election is November 2nd,
Yes.
2021. Becky Hogan is running for at-large. And yeah, looks like she's got a pretty good shot. Make sure you guys go out and vote. Thanks for tuning in, and peace out.